Hello and welcome to Tech Deals and the November 2019 PC Build Guide. Do you want to play any game at 1080p, most games at 1440p? Do you want to live stream to Twitch, edit 4K videos, run intensive CPU programs like Blender and multitask? You've come to the right place. This is a $900 Ryzen 7 2700X build with 32 gigs of RAM, a terabyte of NVMe storage, and a very nice base for a system both today and to be upgraded in the future. This $900 build is a very solid all-around performer with few compromises. It is not the fastest possible computer you could build, it's not a super premium build, but it's a very solid build, and frankly, for most people, this is actually all that you need. Thanks to the 8 cores and 16 threads, and thanks to the very nice RTX 2060 graphics card, this computer will play any current game on the market and any game for the next couple of years at 1080p, and many games at 1440p as well. Also thanks to the CPU, 4K video editing, even at 60 frames per second, is absolutely totally doable, and Blender and other complicated CPU-based 3D rendering programs would also run very well on this, especially for this price. It's a great value. And of course, it's expandable for the future because we have a nice case and we've got a solid motherboard for perhaps future CPU upgrades. Zen 3, anybody? This is a great deal. Links to everything you see here and everything we'll talk about today will be in the video description below to Amazon, Newegg, and eBay. Those are affiliate links. They support the channel when you shop at no extra cost to you. If you love our content, please consider using those. It's greatly appreciated. I will have some benchmarks for you later in the video after we talk about the individual components at both 1080p and 1440p to give you an idea of what this CPU-GPU combination is capable of. Furthermore, as far as productivity and content creation, this is a Ryzen 7 2700X. In 2017, I ran this YouTube channel for a year on the first generation Ryzen 7 1700. So absolutely, I can tell you from personal experience, you can totally do 4K video editing and content creation on a Ryzen 7. For $169, the Ryzen 7 2700X is the deal on CPUs at the moment. 8 cores, 16 threads, 4.3 GHz max turbo, 4.2 GHz gaming performance stock out of the box, and 4.0 GHz all-core performance in Blender and video editing and encoding and that sort of thing. So it really runs well out of the box, even on the stock cooler. It's not as fast as Zen 2, and of course, if you've got a larger budget, the 3700X or even the 3900X are very, very nice. But for the $900 price point, this thing is a screaming deal for $169. For $100, you have a wide selection of 400 series boards to pick from. This is an MSI B450 Tomahawk. Great power delivery. If you want to upgrade to Zen 3 in a year or two, you certainly can do so using a board such as this. You can, if you wish, spend $20 more and get something like an X470 Gaming Plus from MSI. There's several other choices in that $100 to $120 range. If you want to save $20 or $30, you can go to a micro ATX board, and you'll have fewer connection options, fewer expansion items, but you'll save a little bit of money and make some more room in the case. But I think the $100 price point is the sweet spot of motherboards due to the better power delivery than the cheaper boards and the ability to upgrade to a maybe even 12-core CPU in the future. $99 for 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 megahertz RAM. That's what it's currently going for on Newegg. That is incredible. At this price point, I would no longer consider 16 gigabytes to be a wise choice. It doesn't save that much money, and if you're getting an 8-core CPU and you want multitasking performance, if you want to do some even light content creation, live streaming, if you want to be able to play any game today and for the next 3 years, spend the extra $50 and get 32 gigabytes of RAM. By buying it this way, you'll leave open 2 RAM slots to potentially go to 64 should you need it in the future. Probably not for most of you, but at least it remains an option. $320 gets you an RTX 2060 graphics card. It is a nice compromise choice between the lower-end GTX cards and the supers and the higher-end stuff. You can play any game at 1080p very nicely, 100 plus frames per second, maybe even more on some of them, and it's a decent 1440p card as well. Most current games will actually play at 60 plus frames per second at 1440p, and while they won't do that for the next 3+ years, you can always upgrade your graphics card. It's the easiest component to go with. Some of you prefer AMD, and that's fine. The comparable card to this would be an RX 5700, which you can also buy for about $300 to $320. So if you prefer a Radeon instead of an RTX, then by all means do that. But for this case, I picked the 2060. For $50, the MasterBox 511 from Cooler Master is a really good value for the money. If I had $50 and I was looking for a case, this would be very high on my shopping list. There is room in the front to install 3 120mm fans, or even, if you wanted to, a 360mm liquid cooler up front. It's all mesh in the front. The ventilation is spectacular. There is also room for fans and ventilation on the top of the case. So there's mesh in the front, mesh on the top. An included exhaust fan is in the back. We've got an acrylic side panel on the side. There's plenty of room to install drives and run the cables in the back. For $50, this is a nice case for the money. If you want RGB, if you're a big fan of RGB, they make an RGB version of this. I'll link to it down below. For like $30 more, it comes with 3 RGB fans in the front, and the acrylic side panel is replaced with tempered glass. That's a deal if you were otherwise interested in glass and RGB, but otherwise, for the purposes of this $900 build, we went with the non-RGB version of the case. For $50, you can get some very nice power supplies these days. This is a 500-watt Cooler Master unit, 80 plus bronze, with all the nice black cables so it doesn't look ugly inside of your system. You can certainly use it, and there's other options available from Corsair and several other brands. Power supplies are an interesting thing because I see many people thinking that they've got to buy like a 750-watt 80 plus gold in order to run a computer like this. You really don't. This CPU on average is going to pull 65 to 75 watts in most games, 110 to 130 watts at most under the most extreme workloads. The graphics card's typically going to pull about 150 to 170 watts at most, and that's for a factory overclocked card. Everything else in the system is pretty minor, so you're looking at absolutely the most 300 watts total between these two components. A 500-watt power supply is really all you need. If you want to get a 600 because it's $10 more, go for it, but 500 is really the sweet spot at the moment. Circling back around to our storage, for $85, you can currently get a 1TB NVMe M.2 SSD, and at this price point for a $900 build, why would you do anything less? Plenty of storage for your games, programs, applications, and everything's just getting larger these days, so I definitely wouldn't get anything less than a 1TB drive at the $900 price point. And of course, most motherboards have at least 2 M.2 slots to let you add a second one in the future, and the case also has some drive bays for some 2.5-inch SSDs if you want. Now, you can buy some very expensive drives, but the Crucial P1 and the Intel 660p would be my first 2 choices for this build. They're under $100 for a terabyte. They're not quite as fast as like a Samsung drive. You won't notice the difference. If you're not building a $2,000 premium computer, you truly won't notice the difference, and it's not where I would put the money. So 1TB NVMe, that's a deal. On the day I filmed this video, the total build price of everything on the desk was actually $875. Yes, I know the title down there beneath the video says $900, but you have to pick a number. Prices change every day. This will go up or down by $5. That'll go up or down by $5. When you watch this video, the components will have all shifted a little bit. Custom PCs are custom. This is a guide. This is meant to help you figure out what is a balanced configuration of parts that will work well together. There are no serious bottlenecks in this configuration. The CPU is appropriate to the graphics card. The SSD is appropriate to the RAM and to the motherboard. The power supply is appropriate to the system. If you take one component and way over upgrade it over everything else, you end up with an unbalanced system and you end up with bottlenecks and basically an inefficient use of your money. So if you want to change the brand of the video card, or if you want to change the RAM to RGB or something else, or you want to use a different SSD, it's your computer. You do it any way you want. But this is just a nice, roughly $900 configuration that I think will meet the needs of probably 95% of everybody who watches my videos. And I just have to say, this is an incredible value for the money. The first game I'm going to show you is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, everybody's favorite optimized game from Ubisoft. These are going to be very short runs of only 15 seconds each, just to give you a small taste of what the performance looks like. You can see the real-time performance numbers in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. There are 8 games here total. This is Dawn of War 3. Quite a different game to Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I think some of you might like to see how well it performs. The next game up is F1 2018, and it is the fastest performing game in this lineup. 1440p, high detail, not bad for an under $1,000 build. Next up, we have Far Cry New Dawn, the full price DLC to Far Cry 5. Yes, I'm contractually obligated to say that every time I show this in a video at this point. It's just a new thing for 2020. Now, this isn't as fast as F1 2018, but it's still pretty darn fast, especially for 1440p high detail. Take a look at Ghost Recon Breakpoint, not Wildlands, Breakpoint. And yes, this is 1440p, and yes, that is a $300 graphics card and $150-ish CPU running very well. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we are well north of 60 frames per second here. That's not bad on this hardware with some room to grow. Next up, we're going to have Strange Brigade, which I played during E3 2018. And again, it's very well optimized, just like F1 2018, over 100 frames per second. That is very nice, especially on the Vulkan engine. I'm surprised more games don't use it, considering its performance. The Division 2, a game that I'm getting close to finishing level 30, over 50 hours of time in so far. And while I've certainly played on faster machines, I have to say that this was pretty good, all things considered. 64 frames per second average in Assassin's Creed Odyssey was the lowest performance of the bunch. I said at the beginning of the video that this will play any game at 1080p high detail and most games at 1440p. The truth of the matter is Assassin's Creed Odyssey would be pretty rough to play this at 1440p high detail. Yes, it averages 64, but it's going to be way below 60 too much of the time, in my opinion. Turn the detail down to medium, turn off the fog, or turn off the shadows. It'll make a big difference. Take a look at the rest of these. Far Cry New Dawn, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, The Division 2 are all in the 80s. That's really, really good considering the level of this hardware, and this machine will have some breathing room going forward. Now, if you want to be able to play at these performance levels for the next 3+ years in these type of games, it's not going to do that at 1440p, but it will do that at 1080p. So it's a 1440p card today and a 1080p card for the next 3-ish years until, well, frankly, new games come down the line. As for 1% lows, you can see Assassin's Creed Odyssey just fell right off the cliff there at 43, but the rest of the games held pretty close to 60 frames per second. What that means is that the vast majority of the time in today's AAA games, you'll average over 60 frames per second, and you should hold a minimum of 60 frames per second most, if not all, of the time. Now, these are built-in benchmarks, and the real-world gameplay is going to have some dips below this, but it's pretty good, all things considered. Now, this is the 0.1% low, which means that 0.1% of the time, this is the lowest the frame rate drops to, and you'll notice that several of these went way down. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, but of course there's some scene transitions in there. Dawn of War 3 down to 36 frames per second. It was a good performer, over 90 on the average, which just goes to show that if you want your minimum frame rates in 1% and 0.1% low numbers to be higher, you kind of have to way overshoot the technical requirements of games in order to have those rare circumstances be higher. But if you don't mind the extremely occasional dip in performance, this thing's a beast. This computer is an absolute powerhouse for $900. For every dollar you're spending here, you're getting great performance for the money. Looking back over the past 30 years of computing, the fact that you can get a 4K video editing workstation for under $1,000 just absolutely blows my mind. If you like deals, if you like value, Zen 2 is nice, Intel is nice, that's all great. But this is the sweet spot in terms of price to performance. And because it's upgradable, Zen 3 anybody next year, then you've got some future in front of you without having to get rid of all of your components and parts. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below. Hit that bell notification icon next to it to actually be notified when new videos come out. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions, you know where the comment section is. Links in the video description. Great way to support the channel at no extra cost to you. To all these parts, Amazon, Newegg, and eBay down there. You can also support us on Patreon or Floatplane if you would like early access to the benchmark charts, early access to filming scripts, what I work with, and early access to the videos themselves. Those are down in the video description as well. Thank you all so very much for watching. I will see all of you next time.